My name is Elena Brooks. I'm a logistics officer in the U.S. Army. 15 years of service, 4 overseas deployments. I've coordinated disaster response after earthquakes, set up food routes under gunfire, and kept my soldiers supplied through sandstorms and blizzards. But nothing prepared me for the moment I opened that email. My husband divorced me by email while I was deployed overseas. He emptied our joint account. He moved his new girlfriend into our house. He took my dog. And he thought I'd be too distracted, too uniformed to do anything about it. He was wrong. I was halfway through cataloging medical shipments in a converted garage in the Jordanian desert when the notification popped up. Subject line: "Let's be adults about this." For a second, I thought it was a joke. A prank email from a spam folder. But then I saw the sender, Kyle Brooks. I clicked. 3 lines. No greeting, no warmth, no explanation. Just, I filed for divorce. I've moved Monica into the house. Let's keep things respectful and not make this difficult. An attachment sat below like a quiet grenade. Brooks' divorce agreement PDF. My heart didn't race. My vision didn't blur. It was stranger than that. It was still. I looked around the room. Private Collins was spooning cup noodles with Tabasco. 2 medics were laughing over a TikTok video. The portable AC unit rattled in its usual uneven rhythm. No one had any idea that 3 feet away a marriage had just died in HTML font. I reread it once, then again. Then I closed my laptop, walked out into the courtyard, watched the sky for a long time. Not looking for answers, just for proof the world still turned. Then I went back and sat down and typed exactly 1 word. Understood. That was it. No argument, no fury, no begging. Just understood. I remember pressing send and watching the message disappear. It felt like locking a rusted door that had been creaking open for months, and realizing there was never anything sacred behind it. Just echoes. Kyle had made his move. Calculated. Distant. Like a man boxing up files in an office he didn't plan to return to. But here's the thing he didn't know. He didn't know I had already seen this coming. That I had been preparing silently for months. That I wasn't the kind of woman who fell apart. I was the kind who took inventory of damage, of betrayal, of assets. He thought this email would be the end of me. But it was only the beginning. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't cry either. Instead, I opened my backup drive, pulled up my records, and started planning. Not revenge, not even justice. Restoration, because he took from me what I built. And now I was going to take back what was mine. I hadn't thought about our wedding in years. Not really. But that night after the email, when the base went quiet and the desert cooled just enough to breathe, I found myself remembering his smile. The one he wore standing under the arched ceiling of St. Matthew's Church. Kyle looked handsome that day. Nervous but steady. The kind of steady you mistake for loyalty when you're young. He stood in a charcoal suit, hands clasped, rocking slightly on his heels. And when I walked down the aisle in my mother's veil, he smiled. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't showy. It was soft. A private kind of smile just for me. Back then I thought it meant something sacred. That I was safe. That I was chosen. That's the dangerous part about memory. It doesn't age as quickly as people do. I remember the way his eyes softened when he whispered, "You look unstoppable." I remember how he traced his thumb across my knuckles when we said our vows. I remember thinking, this is a man who will hold the line with me. Always. Now I know better. It wasn't a vow he meant to keep. It was a performance he forgot he was giving. I watched that memory play out like an old film, muted just light and movement and illusion. And I wondered, what was I really looking at that day? Was it love? Or just the shape of it? Because whatever it was, it didn't survive an email. And that smile I thought I could trust now felt like the first lie. They never leave all at once. The good ones, the selfish ones, even the cowards. None of them walk out the front door one morning and never come back. No, they leave in pieces. And the pieces always start small. With Kyle, it began with silence. Not total silence, just a thinning of conversation. The space between our words stretched out like old rope. He stopped asking how my day was. And when I told him anyway out of habit, he nodded absently while checking his phone. At first I told myself he was tired. Work was stressful. He was distracted, not distant. But then came the hiking weekends. 3 in 1 month, then every other weekend. Always with a group I never met in places with poor cell service. I asked once if he wanted me to come along. He blinked, said it's mostly guys from work, probably not your scene. And I remember laughing, brushing it off. But something in my chest tightened. The next weekend I noticed he left his wedding ring in the bathroom. Another time he changed the password on our shared Netflix account. No big deal, I told myself. People update things all the time. But when I asked him what the new password was, he hesitated. Let me check, I forgot. He never gave it to me. And the flowers, he used to buy me white tulips on Saturdays. Every week. No special reason, just because. They stopped coming sometime around June. I didn't say anything. I just let the vase stay empty for a while, then quietly put it away in a cabinet. He started locking his phone, started taking it into the bathroom, started facing it down when it was on the table. Our dinners got quieter. I'd talk about the upcoming deployment. He'd nod. I'd ask about his job. He'd shrug. He was always looking at something past me, behind me. Like he was already on his way out, just hadn't figured out how to say it yet. The last time we were intimate, he kissed me with his eyes open. It was brief, mechanical, like scratching something off a list. And the dog Leo used to sleep by my side. Now he followed Kyle everywhere. When I reached for him, he hesitated. It's a strange thing watching your life dim while you're still living it. Like someone slowly turning down the volume one click at a time. But I didn't scream, didn't accuse, didn't snoop. Because I'd spent my life being calm under pressure. In Afghanistan, I once drove a truck full of insulin across a mountain pass while insurgents blocked the main road. In Haiti, I coordinated a food drop after a hurricane flattened the supply depots. You don't lose your head in my job. You watch, you wait, you log everything. So that's what I did. I paid attention, not to catch him, but to protect myself. Because whatever was happening, I could feel it shifting. I wasn't sure what it was yet. But I knew it wasn't love, not anymore. Still, I hoped that maybe I was wrong. That maybe it was just a rough patch. That maybe tulips would come again. But they didn't. Instead, I went to war. And he went hiking. People think strength is loud. That it's shouting, slamming doors, delivering ultimatums. But I've learned real strength is quiet. It moves without warning. It plans in silence. I didn't storm out. I didn't confront Kyle. I didn't ask who she was because by then I already knew someone was taking up space that used to belong to me. So instead of reacting, I started preparing. Not to catch him, not to punish him. Just to protect myself. The first thing I did was open a new account at a credit union across town. Separate from our joint checking. Separate from everything. It wasn't a lot, just a sliver of each paycheck, some deployment bonuses, my per diem from a training conference. Small enough not to raise questions, steady enough to build a cushion. Next, I made copies of everything that mattered, our marriage certificate. The deed to the house signed under my name, thanks to my VA loan eligibility. Insurance papers. The title to my car, my mother's will. I scanned every page and mailed them to my Aunt Jo in Portland. She used to work as a paralegal before she retired. Sharp as a scalpel. Didn't ask unnecessary questions. Her voicemail reply was short, smart girl. If you need a lawyer, I still know 2 good ones. I didn't tell her what was happening. Not exactly. Just that I had a feeling. Then I bought a basic home security system, 3 cameras. Indoor and outdoor. Synced to cloud storage locked behind a 2-factor code. I told Kyle it was for safety. He shrugged. Didn't even ask the password. Just said, whatever makes you feel better. And it did. Not because it made me safer, but because it gave me eyes. A way to bear witness, even from a desert half a world away. I backed up my emails. Reset my military pension account access. Changed the lock on the filing cabinet in the garage, where I kept important documents. Then labeled the key and dropped it into a safety deposit box. There was no drama. No late-night tears. No accusations. Just quiet logistics. Like preparing for a storm, you're no longer trying to avoid, just endure. And through all of it, I kept moving like nothing had changed. I packed for deployment, tucked my uniform, double-checked my orders. Kyle kissed my forehead at the airport, told me to stay safe, didn't wait to watch my plane take off. I sat by the window that whole flight and thought, This is the last version of us that I'll ever see. Polite, civil, hollow. But I had no plans to beg. No fantasy of saving anything. Because some things are worth fighting for. And some things are just waiting for you to let go. What I did wasn't revenge. It wasn't sabotage. It was strategy. A woman can grieve with one hand and prepare with the other. I didn't know what was coming. But I knew one thing for sure: I would not return to ashes. And I would not return with nothing. The last time I saw Kyle, we were standing under the departure board at Portland International. It was raining, one of those early October drizzles that blurred the edges of everything: faces, voices, intentions. I had my uniform on. He wore a windbreaker over a t-shirt I hadn't seen before. He didn't pack me a snack like he used to. Didn't remind me to double-check my travel orders. Didn't even complain about airport coffee, which he always did. Instead, he stood with his hands in his pockets, rocking slightly on his heels. Eyes fixed on the tile floor like it had something worth studying. When the final boarding call came over the intercom, I turned to face him. He opened his arms stiffly like he was checking a box, not saying goodbye to a woman he had built a decade of life with. The hug was brief, safe. He smelled like cedarwood and wintergreen gum. But his body didn't lean in. It held back. And then I noticed something. He didn't look me in the eye, not once. He kissed my cheek, said, "Stay safe, okay," and stepped back. Already turning. Already gone. I stood there for a second too long. Long enough for a woman in a wheelchair behind me to clear her throat trying to get by. So I adjusted my duffel, nodded, and walked away. But as I reached the security line, I glanced over my shoulder. Just once. And he wasn't there. Didn't even pretend to wait. That should have been enough. A warning, a flare, a mirror held up to everything I had refused to name, but I told myself he was busy. Tired, distracted. I excused his distance the way women are trained to excuse 1,000 tiny abandonments. And as the plane lifted off, I stared out the window and thought, maybe this deployment will clear the air. Maybe we'll find our way back. Maybe love just gets quiet sometimes. I was wrong. That goodbye wasn't an intermission. It was a curtain call. And I had been the only one who didn't know the show was over. I used to think I was strong because I wore a uniform. Because I could survive dust, heat, exhaustion, and war zones. But strength, I've learned, isn't about surviving what others throw at you. It's about not closing your eyes to the truth, even when the truth is someone you used to love refusing to look you in the face. It happened during a supply drop. I was in the back of a transport truck, holding down a clipboard with one hand and a tarp with the other, when my watch buzzed. A vibration against my wrist so familiar it barely registered until I glanced down. Withdrawal alert, $112 $348 from joint checking. Brooks household. The wind caught the edge of the clipboard. I didn't reach for it. I didn't blink. I just stared at the number like it had been carved into my skin. I stepped off the truck and moved behind a stack of crates. The sun was low and sharp in the sky, casting everything in that unforgiving golden light that makes even dust look honest. I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app, refreshed, twice. The number didn't change. Gone. Gone without a trace of hesitation. Gone like it had been waiting to leave. I scrolled back. Smaller transactions had started weeks ago, $400 here, $900 there. Each marked transfer to XT account. Nothing unusual on the surface, but together it formed a slow strategic bleed. The kind you only see if you're looking for patterns. And I had been looking. Not because I didn't trust Kyle, but because I finally trusted my gut more. I called Aunt Jo. She picked up on the first ring. "Took you long enough," she said, but her voice was softer than the words. "I just got a notification. A withdrawal. Big, joint account. $112,000. "I know," she said. "I've been trying to reach you for 2 days." There was silence between us, then the kind that only happens when truth is about to knock the wind out of you. I didn't want to say anything without proof, she added. "But I think there's more. I went ahead and requested bank activity reports like you asked. I have them." I sat down on a wooden pallet. Flies buzzed somewhere nearby, but I couldn't feel anything. Couldn't hear anything beyond the slow thud of my pulse. Jo continued carefully now. "There's a second account. Not just in Kyle's name." My throat closed. I didn't want to ask. I already knew the answer. Who else? I said, almost a whisper. A rustle of paper on her end. Monica Reyes, listed as co-owner. The name hit like a slap I never saw coming. Monica. Yes. Address listed matches your home. Opened 3 weeks after your deployment. Activity began almost immediately. What kind of activity? Refinancing paperwork. Checks issued. A loan pulled against the house. I felt the ground give just a little under my boots. Even though I wasn't standing, Joe, I said slowly. I never signed anything. I know, she said. My stomach nodded. Are you sure you sent me copies of your signature last year? For safekeeping. The one on this refinancing form doesn't match. And they didn't even get your middle initial right. I looked around the yard, saw my team offloading crates, calling out to each other, laughing. Their world was still intact. Mine had just imploded quietly. The house, the account, the name Monica. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but I didn't cry. Not here, not yet, not for this. Joe exhaled on the other end. Elena, I don't want to push, but we need to act fast. If this was forged, it's fraud. And if the loan's gone through, they could sell the house. We have to freeze assets, file a police report, maybe escalate to federal level. I pressed my thumb into the palm of my hand, grounding myself. Do you still have that lawyer friend? 2 of them. I'll need both, I figured. Then another silence, but this one was mine. A gathering of everything I was about to become. This wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't betrayal. It was a calculated theft dressed in a marriage license, and I wasn't going to let it stand. I stood up, wiped the back of my hand across my jaw, squared my shoulders. A supply sergeant called out to me, waving a clipboard. I nodded, walked toward him, took it from his hands, signed. Orders were orders, and mine starting now were clear. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I stayed in the comms tent long after my shift ended. The only light coming from the dusty screen in front of me and the dim LED glow of the satellite router blinking in the corner. The rest of the camp had gone quiet, but inside me everything was roaring. I stared at Monica's name on the account summary Joe had forwarded. Monica Reyes. I had never heard of her, no mutual friends, no old classmates. She wasn't some shadow from Kyle's past. She was new, fresh, intentional. There was a photo linked to a public profile. Joe had tracked down Monica in yoga pants, beaming in front of a Himalayan salt lamp, holding a rescued greyhound. A lifestyle coach, apparently, holistic wellness, essential oils, and Instagram quotes about radical self-love. She didn't look like someone who would forge legal documents. But then again, I didn't look like someone who would be betrayed this efficiently either. There it was, my name typed under a signature that didn't belong to me. The middle initial was wrong. The curve of the B in Brooks was too narrow. And worst of all, the pen pressure didn't match. It was a replica. An attempt. A lie dressed up as permission. They had used this forgery to pull equity from the house, our house, and move forward with refinancing paperwork. Joe confirmed that a local bank had approved a loan for $290,000 just 10 days ago. Monica and Kyle were listed as co-applicants, not tenants, not partners. Owners. I felt something tighten in my ribs, a quiet kind of fury, the kind that doesn't need to scream to make itself known. I thought of the renovations I'd done to that house, laying down tile in the guest bathroom during a weekend leave, painting the walls a soft green. Kyle said he liked planting lavender by the front door to remind me of my mother. Now Monica was living in it, sleeping in my sheets, sitting on my couch. She didn't inherit that life. She invaded it. And Kyle, he didn't even have the decency to lie with effort. He just assumed I was too far, too loyal, too military to do anything about it. I wasn't angry. I was focused. I pulled up the security login screen for the cameras I had installed before deployment. The same ones Kyle had never bothered to ask about. I entered my code, waited. And just like that, I was home. The driveway came into view first, then the front porch, then the living room. There they were. Monica curled up in the recliner I bought for Kyle when he hurt his back. Leo, my dog, asleep at her feet. The coffee table was cluttered with smoothie cups and a half-burned candle labeled Energy Cleanse. Kyle walked in a few minutes later. T-shirt, sweatpants. My old Seahawks hoodie, the one I wore the day I passed my first PT test. He kissed her on the forehead. She laughed. I muted the feed. Didn't need the sound. I had enough. Enough to confirm. Enough to act. I clicked download on the last 24 hours of footage. Saved it to an encrypted drive. Then I opened my deployment log. Marked the date. Wrote down the time. Made a note to myself: refinance fraud confirmed. Identity theft. Criminal cohabitation. Civil action pending. Then I closed the laptop. Wrote one sentence in my journal, the one I kept tucked into my rucksack. This is no longer personal. This is procedural. Because once you fake my name, once you sell what's mine without asking, once you forge your way into my life, you stop being someone I loved. You become a file, and I know how to process files. It didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt more like watching a film of my own life projected on a screen across the room, except I wasn't in it anymore. I was just the observer sitting in a cold metal chair, arms folded, watching someone else's choices play out frame by frame. There was distance now, not the physical kind. I'd grown used to that. No, this was a colder kind of distance. A widening canyon between the woman I was in that house and the woman sitting in this desert camp, silent still and quietly rewriting the future. I didn't cry, not when I saw Monica's name, not when I watched Kyle kiss her on the security feed, not when I realized the refinance had already been processed, because crying belongs to grief. And what I felt wasn't grief, it was precision. I opened my notebook, the same one where I logged food inventories and fuel reports, and I made a new list. 1. Call Joe again. Ask her to activate both lawyers. 2. Secure all cloud backups. 3. Revoke Kyle's access to any account I could still touch. 4. Schedule early return protocol through the emergency leave system. 5. Create digital folder evidence, subfolder financial, subfolder security. 6. Document timeline of events. Email bank notifications, video footage, timestamps. Each line I wrote made things quieter in my chest. Not easier, just quieter. I changed the passwords to both my personal and military-linked email accounts, enabled two-factor authentication, forwarded all notifications to my secure backup. I downloaded the last 2 weeks of camera footage and sent a compressed version to Joe's encrypted email. She responded within 20 minutes, received. Don't do anything emotional. Let me handle this until you're back. That last line made me pause. Because here's the thing, I wasn't emotional. I was empty. And that emptiness wasn't numbness, it was clarity. Kyle had moved out of our marriage long before Monica moved into our house. I saw that now. Not because I caught them, but because I had been watching even when I didn't want to. He had become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who took what wasn't his with the calm of a man confident he wouldn't be challenged. And for a while, he was right, but not anymore. That night I stared at my cot in the corner of the tent. I didn't lie down. Just sat on the edge, boots on the floor, hands folded in my lap. Somewhere outside, someone was snoring. Another voice muttered a prayer in the darkness. A kettle boiled over in the distance. And I wrote one more line in my notebook. The marriage died long before the documents arrived. I'm just the one who stayed long enough to call time of death. I looked up at the tent ceiling, traced the seams above me, let my eyes adjust to the dark. Then I made my final note: request emergency leave. No explanations, just facts. I didn't need to tell command about Kyle or Monica. I only had to prove financial fraud. The Army doesn't deal in emotional damage, but it respects protocol. And I knew protocol, backwards and forwards. By sunrise, I had my leave request submitted. By noon, I had confirmation. 1 seat booked on the next military flight home. No questions asked. I closed my notebook, checked the files again, backed them up twice, then sat in silence. Not mourning, not hurting, just preparing. Because when trust finally goes cold, it doesn't scream, it doesn't plead. It signs the forms, books the ticket, and walks out of the fire with nothing but a plan. I landed in Oregon under a low gray sky that looked like it hadn't lifted in weeks. Rain misted against the airport windows as I stepped off the transport shuttle, boots damp before I even cleared the curb. It wasn't the kind of rain that made headlines, just a slow, steady drizzle that soaked into your skin without asking. The kind of weather that doesn't announce anything. It just lingers, fitting. No one knew I was back. Not my neighbors, not my coworkers. Certainly not Kyle. The military flight had landed at the base, but I signed out before anyone had the chance to ask too many questions. I took a cab instead of requesting pickup. Told the driver to avoid the freeway. I didn't need speed. I needed quiet. I checked into a motel on the west side of Eugene. One of those places with outdated floral bedspreads and a vending machine that only took quarters. The woman at the front desk barely looked up when I slid my ID across the counter. She handed me a key card and said, "Room 117. Ice machine's broken. Perfect." The room smelled faintly of bleach and coffee. A single window looked out onto the back alley where an old bicycle leaned against a dumpster. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't unpack. I just placed my duffel bag in the corner and peeled off my rain-soaked jacket. I stood at the edge of the bed for a long time, not sitting, not moving, just letting the stillness settle. Coming home without coming home is a strange thing. You step onto familiar soil, but it doesn't feel like yours. Every streetlight, every road sign reminds you where you are, but not who you were when you left. This wasn't a homecoming. It was a reconnaissance mission. I ordered takeout from a place Kyle and I used to go on Fridays. The cashier on the phone asked for a name. I gave her Joe's, not mine. When the food arrived, I paid in cash, tipped well, closed the door without a word. That night, I lay on the motel bed in my uniform pants and a thermal shirt. I listened to the rain tapping on the window pane and thought about how strange it was to be this close to the life I once had without being in it. Just 10 miles east, there was a house with green shutters and lavender by the door. My dog was probably curled up on the couch. My couch. And Kyle, if he even noticed I was back in the country, hadn't reached out. Of course he hadn't. He thought he was safe. He thought I was still overseas. He thought I wouldn't come back without warning. But I wasn't here for conversation. I was here for truth, for evidence, for closure. And the best way to find the truth is in silence, when no one knows you're watching. I turned off the lamp, pulled the thin blanket up to my chest, and slept for the first time in weeks without dreaming of dust and distance. Tomorrow I'd begin. The next morning I made coffee using the tiny drip machine in the corner of the motel room. It tasted like plastic and burnt grounds, but I drank it anyway. Then I opened my laptop, logged into the security portal, and clicked live feed. The cameras blinked awake. The front porch came first, wet from the rain leaves scattered across the welcome mat I had picked out from a roadside antique shop. The word home painted in faded cursive, still visible though barely. Then the living room camera loaded. And there she was, Monica, wearing my robe, the soft slate blue one Kyle gave me on our 5th anniversary, the one I wore on lazy Sunday mornings, while reading the paper with Leo curled up beside me. I recognized the way the fabric folded near the shoulder, the tiny loose stitch that never unraveled, no matter how many times I told myself I'd fix it. She was barefoot, cradling a mug, walking through my living room like she belonged there. Leo followed her, his tail wagging. My breath caught not from pain but something deeper, a sensation I didn't have a name for. It wasn't jealousy, it wasn't shock. It was a quiet betrayal that lived in the small things, in fabric, in mugs, in dogs choosing comfort over memory. She sat on the couch, pulled her knees up, sipped, reached down and scratched Leo behind the ears. He leaned in, nuzzled her hand. I watched it happen with a stillness that felt unnatural, like I was the one frozen behind the lens. Kyle entered the frame a moment later, holding a grocery bag. He kissed her on the temple, tossed his keys onto the table. The same table I refinished by hand 3 summers ago. I remembered sanding it for hours, trying to get the stain just right. Now it held a crystal bowl full of oranges, an open bottle of kombucha, my absence. They laughed at something. Monica tucked her feet under her. Kyle opened the fridge, pulled out almond milk. Neither of them said my name, but I could feel the echo of it being erased from every corner of the house. I hit record. Then I opened my notebook and began writing each line, short, factual, surgical. 10:43 a.m. Monica Reyes appears in blue robe, item confirmed as mine. 10:44 a.m. Dog Leo shows active comfort behavior toward Monica. 10:46 a.m. Kyle enters, shows no sign of concealment. 10:47 a.m. Keys tossed on table. Same table, refinished July 2018. 10:49 a.m. No tension in body language. Full cohabitation inferred. I clicked back through archived footage just a few hours behind. There they were in the kitchen. She was chopping something. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. It was mechanical, routine, rehearsed, not the beginning of something, the middle. This wasn't a fling, it was a replacement, and the part that hurt most wasn't the intimacy. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was how effortless they made it look, like I had never even existed. I paused the video, stared at the still frame. I whispered out loud, not out of pain, but to mark it. This is what erasure looks like. I switched to another feedback yard camera. The lavender I had planted was overgrown. The small wind chime my mother gave me was missing. In its place was a string of colorful prayer flags, Monica's no doubt. She hadn't just moved in. She had taken root. And Kyle, he didn't seem to notice the difference. Or maybe he preferred it this way. I closed the footage, sat in silence for a moment. Not broken, not boiling, just aware. Then I made another note. This house is no longer mine. Not legally yet, but spiritually, it's gone. But that didn't mean I would let it go. Ownership isn't just presence, it's proof. And I had more than enough of that now. I closed my notebook, saved the recordings, backed them up to an encrypted drive. Then I wrote a single sentence on the first page of a new section. They moved in like I'd never come back. Let's show them what coming back looks like. I met Catherine Jensen at a diner 20 miles outside Eugene. She chose the place neutral ground, low profile, decent coffee. A spot where truckers pass through and nobody asked questions unless you sat in their booth. She was already there when I arrived. Mid-40s black blazer over a rust-colored turtleneck and a legal pad she didn't bother hiding. Her eyes tracked me the moment I walked in, not unkind but focused, like someone trained to notice inconsistencies. I introduced myself quietly. She motioned to the seat across from her. "No need for pleasantries," she said, sliding over a manila folder. "You didn't just get betrayed, you got targeted." The words didn't sting, they clicked into place. Inside the folder were printouts, account statements, real estate filings, and an incident report from Fort Carson, Colorado. A military spouse, deployed to the Middle East. Husband refinanced the house without her consent, listed another woman as co-borrower, sold the house within 90 days. By the time the soldier returned, everything was gone. Money, home, marriage. I flipped to the next one, a case in Pensacola. Same pattern, different names. Catherine leaned forward, voice steady. "I've been tracking this pattern for months. Mostly small cases, disguised as messy divorces. But when you look closer, same methods, same timeline, same players." She tapped her pen once. "Your husband used Monica's name. He forged your signature. We have timestamps, transaction trails. And the deeper we dig, the more we're seeing a structure. This isn't just infidelity, it's exploitation." I nodded slowly. "So? This is bigger than just me." "It almost always is," she said. "But most victims never know they're victims. They think they were just left. Just unlucky. They don't think to check the refinance paperwork. They don't check the fine print." I pulled out a printed copy of the video stills I had saved. Kyle and Monica laughing in my kitchen, Leo at their feet. Catherine examined them without expression. "They look comfortable," she said. "They are," I replied. She nodded. "Do you have proof of your deployment dates?" I handed over a copy of my orders. She scanned them briefly, then slipped them into her folder. "That's going to matter," she said. "Federal protections exist for active duty service members. What they've done, especially during deployment, could push this into felony territory." I didn't flinch. I asked, "What's the next step?" Catherine gave a small smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, because it's not about victory. It's about knowing the work just began. We escalate. I'm referring this to a federal financial crimes unit. FBI's already flagged 2 similar cases in Nevada and Texas. If we can connect the dots, names, methods, property records, we have a conspiracy. I looked down at the manila folder again. Each paper felt like a piece of a puzzle I hadn't known I was part of, until now. "They thought I wouldn't notice," I said quietly, "that I'd be too far away, too loyal, too slow to respond." Catherine met my eyes, and now I said, "I'm early, and I'm watching." She slid a business card across the table. "You'll be hearing from a federal agent within the week. They'll want a full statement. Bring everything: emails, footage, bank records. The cleaner your timeline, the faster we can move." I tucked the card into my pocket. Catherine folded her legal pad, stood and adjusted her blazer. One more thing, she said. You were smart to come quietly. That's why they never saw you coming. She walked out into the misty afternoon like a shadow folding into itself. I stayed in the booth for a moment longer, fingers still on the edge of the folder. They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd stolen from others. This wasn't a story of heartbreak. It was a pattern, and I was going to be the one who broke it. Back at the motel, I plugged in the old external hard drive I'd pulled from the lockbox before deployment. Kyle never thought twice about it. He assumed it only held wedding photos, tax files, maybe some archived emails. He wasn't wrong, but he wasn't right either. Kyle was careless with digital clutter. I wasn't. I knew him well enough to know he reused templates, downloaded things just in case, and rarely deleted anything if it looked official. I opened the folder marked House Docs 2019, then another labeled Mortgage Review Backup. Inside PDFs, property records, a few scanned documents with unfamiliar names, some labeled Sample Draft Refi, others marked with addresses I didn't recognize. At first glance it looked like research, but one file stood out: Refi Options, rrogers.pdf. I didn't know anyone named R. Rogers, but the document, it was almost identical to the one Kyle used to refinance our home. Same format, same bank. I opened another Quick Sale Notes.fl 2020. Inside was a bullet point list: seller deployed, wife inaccessible, cosign, via power of attorney close, under 60 days split, Apria 70/30, wire transfer preferred, no dates, no names, just notes. But the phrasing was too specific, too clinical to be casual. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was a process. He'd done this before. Or at the very least planned it with someone who had. Catherine's words echoed in my mind. They don't just leave, they execute. That's what this was, an execution of a formula. Step 1. Wait for spouse to deploy. Step 2. Initiate refinance. Step 3. Introduce cosigner. Step 4. Move in new partner. Step 5. Sell fast. Step 6. Disappear with the money, and behind it all the same assumptions: that we wouldn't see it coming, that we'd be too busy, too far, too trusting, that we wouldn't fight back. I opened my notebook and drew 2 columns. Left side names, right side dates and documents. I began mapping what I had, linking Monica to the property filing, matching that with the signature inconsistencies Joe had flagged, then cross-referencing the transaction timelines with my deployment orders. The more I connected, the less it felt like a marriage gone wrong. And the more it felt like I had been recruited into a machine I never agreed to join. This wasn't just about Kyle's affair. It was about convenience, about access, about leveraging trust to make clean money from dirty paperwork. And Monica. She wasn't some innocent yoga instructor caught up in his charm. She was in the files too. Her name, her signature, her email on a seller's agreement from a property in Nevada dated just over a year ago. The same notary, the same bank branch, the same script. I leaned back in the chair, not overwhelmed, not panicked, just certain. They weren't improvising, they were repeating, and this time they'd repeated it on the wrong woman. I waited until just past noon. I'd learned their routine by now. Kyle usually returned from the gym around 11. Monica did a live stream meditation at 10. They ate around 11:30, then sat down with their laptops, probably to manage the illusion of a productive life. At 12:06 p.m., the front door camera blinked. A black sedan pulled into the driveway. Not Kyle's, not Monica's. A new car, unfamiliar license plate, rear tinted windows. The driver stepped out, male, mid-40s, navy blazer, messenger bag slung over one shoulder. Confident posture, quick glance at his watch. Real estate agent. I didn't need the logo on his clipboard to know. The door opened. Monica stood there, smiling, hair pulled back, wearing a cream blouse I recognized. Mine. She welcomed him in like she'd been doing it for years. I clicked over to the living room feed. Angle was perfect. Kyle came in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. Monica introduced him casually. Daniel, this is Kyle. They shook hands. No hesitation. No shame. Daniel placed a folder on the coffee table and pulled out a tablet. So here's where we are. The comps in this area are strong. We can list at $470, but I'm confident we'll get a fast offer at $440, maybe even cash. Kyle nodded. And timeline, Daniel replied. I've got a buyer already circling. They love quick closes. If you greenlight it today, we can photograph tomorrow, list by Wednesday, showing by Saturday. Monica folded her legs underneath her. Let's do it. And then the line that told me everything. She leaned forward, voice casual. She won't be back in time anyway. Daniel paused. The other owner, Monica, smiled. She's overseas. Deployment. Minimal contact. We'll handle everything, Kyle added. I've got a workaround if we hit a snag. Daniel blinked. You forged it before. Kyle didn't answer directly. He just grinned and shrugged. That was enough. I turned on the audio capture. Hit record. Open my notebook. 12:09 p.m. Daniel Spencer arrives at property. 12:12 p.m. Discussion of listing and sale timeline. 12:14 p.m. Monica confirms co-owner is deployed. 12:15 p.m. Kyle implies forged authorization. Monica stood gesturing toward the hallway. Do you want to see the back bedrooms? Daniel followed her. Kyle remained in the frame, scrolling on his phone, still wearing my sweatshirt. I watched every second, and something shifted in me, not anger, not grief, purpose. This was no longer about what they'd taken. It was about what they were about to do, and I couldn't let them. Daniel and Monica returned a few minutes later. He pulled out a form from his folder. Standard seller's disclosure. Since you both live here, I'll need both signatures by Friday. I can draft the listing tonight. Monica nodded, already taking the pen. Kyle asked, and if she contests it? Daniel didn't miss a beat. By the time she finds out, we'll be at closing. These things move fast. Just don't leave digital trails. Kyle laughed. Digital's her game. I'm more of a paper guy. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the camera do the witnessing for me. By the time Daniel left, the plan was in motion. Photos scheduled, listing pending, documents halfway signed. They weren't guessing anymore. They were executing, following a script they'd used before. And now I had all of it. Audio, video, timeline, motive, names. I forwarded the footage to Catherine. No subject line. Just a message in the body caught in the act. Recorded at 12:06. She said I wouldn't be back in time. Then I added one more note in my journal. They don't know I'm not coming back to reclaim them. I'm coming back to reclaim everything. I didn't hesitate. As soon as Daniel's car pulled out of the driveway, I packaged the footage. All of it front door entry, full conversation in the living room. Monica's line about me not coming back. Kyle's smug shrug when asked about forged authorization. I included timestamps, extracted the audio as a separate file, labeled everything clearly, no emotion, just precision. Then I attached the files to an encrypted email and sent them to Catherine using the secure link she'd provided during our meeting. Subject line, recorded attempt to sell. Property ID 7942E message video plus audio. All files labeled. Full conversation captured. They're moving fast. I'm moving faster. I didn't pace. I didn't double-check what I'd sent. I knew it was enough. Instead, I stepped outside the motel room and let the rain fall on my shoulders. Thin, soft drops, almost nothing. But it grounded me. It reminded me that I was back on my own soil, and that this time I wasn't the one being watched. I was the one watching. My phone rang less than an hour later. Catherine Jensen, the voice said. Clipped. Serious. I answered without a word. We saw the footage, she continued. We heard every word. There was a beat of silence, just enough to let the weight land. We're moving, she said. Now. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. We're assigning a federal agent from financial crimes. The evidence you submitted confirms intent, method, and coordination. We've cross-referenced Daniel Spencer with 2 other fraudulent listings in Colorado and Nevada. And Kyle, your husband, was tied to one of those through a shared transfer account. I didn't respond right away. I was still processing how fast the truth was assembling. You did the right thing, Catherine added. And you did it better than half my team would have. A flicker of warmth moved through me, not pride, just quiet affirmation that I hadn't imagined at all. That the betrayal wasn't some private, shameful disaster. It was criminal. What happens next, I asked. We freeze the transaction. We subpoena bank records. We pull Spencer in. And if they're dumb enough to keep talking, we'll have them on conspiracy, fraud, identity theft, and attempted property transfer under false pretense. And Monica. We don't know yet how deep she is, but if she signed anything, we'll find it. I looked down at my open notebook, at the names, the dates, the care I'd taken to document what they never expected to be questioned. Let me know what you need from me, I said. We'll need your full statement. We'll handle the rest. Before she hung up, she paused. You're not just a victim in this, Elena. You're the reason we're going to shut this down. I thanked her and ended the call. For a few moments, I just sat on the edge of the motel bed, fingers resting on the closed lid of my laptop. They thought they were writing the ending, but all they'd done was hand me the pen. And now it was my turn to finish the story. It happened just after sunrise. The kind of Oregon morning where fog clings to your windshield like it has something to say. I sat in a borrowed car at the far end of the cul-de-sac engine, off hands steady on the steering wheel. I hadn't slept much, but I didn't need to. I had waited long enough. At exactly 6:17 a.m., the first unmarked SUV rolled in silent, deliberate headlights off. Then a second, then a third. They surrounded the house with the kind of precision only the federal government knows how to execute. I knew the plan. Catherine had walked me through it. 2 agents at the front, 1 at the back gate, a 4th with eyes on the street. No sirens, no shouting, not yet. Through the windshield, I could just make out the front porch of my house, our house, though the word barely held meaning anymore. The lavender I once planted was overgrown. One of the shutters hung slightly crooked. It was subtle, but I saw it because I built that house detail by detail. And today I was watching it be reclaimed. 6:23 a.m., a knock on the door. Firm, rehearsed. Then voices, then motion, then screaming. Monica's voice broke first. High, frantic, a mixture of confusion and outrage. She stepped into view in nothing but a tank top and leggings, hair, wild barefoot on the porch. Her hands flailed as 2 agents flanked her, calm but firm. I watched from the car, unmoved. Next came Kyle. He was slower to appear, shirtless, groggy, clearly not expecting the day to begin like this. His eyes scanned the scene too fast, trying to make sense of it all, trying to calculate his way out. But there was no equation left to solve, no variable he hadn't already used up. When the agent stepped forward and produced the warrant, I saw Kyle freeze. He didn't argue, he didn't shout, he just blinked. And looked toward the street. I shifted slightly in my seat. I don't know if he saw me. I think he did. His face changed not to anger, not even shame, just recognition, the kind that only exists between people who know exactly why they're no longer on the same side of anything. An agent twisted his arms behind his back. The cuffs clicked once, clean metallic final. And the neighbors, God, the neighbors. They were starting to wake. A woman across the street peeked through her blinds. A man in a robe stepped out onto his porch. A teenage girl paused mid-step on the sidewalk, earbuds still in. And there was Kyle Brooks, former finance manager, husband of a soldier, being led down the porch steps of a house he no longer owned. Hands cuffed, head lowered, no more words, no more control. Monica wailed from somewhere inside. I saw her silhouette behind the front door, pacing, shaking, reaching for things no one would let her take. The door slammed. The agents continued. Boxes were carried out, laptops, folders, a tablet, evidence. My laptop buzzed beside me. A text from Catherine. We've secured the property. Charges being filed today. Go home. You did it. But I didn't leave right away. I stayed. Long enough to watch Kyle sit in the back of a black SUV, cuffs still on, expression blank. Long enough to watch the life they'd built together at my expense be dismantled one item at a time. And through it all, I didn't cry. Not once. Not for the house. Not for the dog. Not for the 10 years that ended in forged signatures and whispering behind closed doors. Because I had already mourned all of it. And now I was witnessing something else. Not revenge. Not even justice. Just the quiet, steady weight of the truth doing its job. And as the SUV door shut behind Kyle and the caravan of agents pulled away, I whispered to no one at all. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need to ruin him. He did that on his own. I just made sure someone was finally watching. Then I started the engine, turned the wheel, drove back toward the motel, not because I was hiding, but because the hardest part was over. And I had nothing left to prove. The voicemail came just after midnight. I was lying on the motel bed, half listening to the rain tap against the window when my phone buzzed. Once, then went still. No name, just a number I didn't save, but I knew who it was. I waited a few minutes before pressing play. I wasn't bracing for anything. I just wanted to be sure I was calm enough to hear it without reacting. Kyle's voice slid through the speaker low and measured his customer service tone, the one he used when trying to land a client or get out of a parking ticket. Elena. Look, I know you're angry. I get it. But you don't need to do this. We can talk like adults. You don't have to get the feds involved. It's not too late to fix this without it getting worse for everybody. There was a pause, a sigh. The sound of him shifting, probably pacing. I didn't mean for things to go this way. You left. I was alone. Things changed. But we can still end this. Respectfully. Please call me back. Then the beep. That was it. 68 seconds of guilt-drenched performance. I stared at the screen for a moment, then set the phone down on the nightstand. I didn't feel rage or sadness. I didn't even feel the need to scream at the hypocrisy of it. I just felt done. Completely irrevocably done. The voice that once told me I'm proud of you now sounded like a man trying to sell me the very thing he'd already stolen. He still thought this was a misunderstanding. He still thought I could be reasoned with, that the woman who left for war would return and settle quietly. He didn't understand what had changed, and maybe that was the final piece of the whole story. He never truly knew me. Not the version of me that grew up watching her mother survive disappointment with dignity. Not the version of me that learned to remain calm in combat zones and evacuate under fire. And certainly not the version of me who could watch her entire life unravel, then pick up a pen, build a case, and walk it straight into federal court. I replayed the voicemail once more, not to analyze it, just to listen to the way his voice cracked on the word, please. It was almost poetic. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because he thought he still had power. He didn't. Not anymore. I deleted the message. Then I turned out the light, folded the covers around me, and let the silence fill the space where his words used to live. He said we could end this respectfully, but he ended it the day he signed my name without asking. And what I built from here on out would have no room for the sound of his voice. I met my attorney at a corner office in downtown Eugene. His name was Mark Heller, former JAG officer, clean-shaven, always wore ties too tight, and carried 2 pens in his blazer like he was expecting a deposition at any moment. He didn't offer small talk. I didn't need any. We sat down across from each other in a conference room that smelled like copier toner and stale carpet. He opened his laptop, brought up a folder labeled Brooks Civil plus Criminal. Then he looked at me, not with pity, not even concern, just readiness. You don't have to face him, he said. We've got everything we need. I nodded. I'm not interested in a confrontation, I told him. I don't need closure, I need consequence. And that became our baseline. No threats, no drama, no courtroom speeches, just filing statements, documentation. The evidence was strong. The recordings, the forged documents, the transaction records. Monica had already agreed to cooperate. Her lawyer negotiated a plea in exchange for full testimony. She admitted to signing false documents, to knowing I was deployed, to participating in the refinance and the attempted sale. She cried during her deposition, I was told. I didn't attend. I didn't need to see her remorse. I only needed her words on record. Kyle, of course, resisted. He claimed ignorance, blamed Monica, blamed the bank, claimed I had emotionally abandoned him by deploying too often, said he thought the power of attorney I'd granted to Aunt Jo gave him partial rights. It didn't. And the court knew it. Mark filed a motion to freeze all assets linked to Kyle's name, another to nullify the refinance, a third to pursue full restitution of the stolen funds. We weren't trying to ruin him. We were just restoring what was mine. I sat in the conference room as Mark walked me through each document. One by one, we rebuilt the narrative, not the one Kyle had spun, but the one rooted in verifiable fact. I signed where I needed to, read every line, asked questions not to stall, but to understand. This wasn't vengeance, it was precision. Kyle's attorney tried to reach out. Twice. Offered mediation. Suggested civil compromise. Said the trial would be costly for everyone. Mark replied with a single sentence, Ms. Brooks will not be entering any agreements that require silence. That was my only condition, that the truth stand, In full view, no NDAs, no sealed settlements, no hush money. If Kyle wanted forgiveness, he'd have to find it somewhere that didn't involve my signature. I never raised my voice. I never sat across from him in a courtroom. I never even saw his face again after that morning on the porch. And still, I won. Not because I humiliated him, but because I didn't let him rewrite the story. I reclaimed the timeline, every date, every decision, every forged initial, and I did it without flinching. That was the thing he never expected, that I could walk away from the fire without needing to watch him burn. I returned to the house only once, the place I used to call home before it became evidence, before it turned into a stage for betrayal. I didn't knock. I had legal clearance. The court had granted me temporary sole access to finalize the transfer of ownership. The real estate agent stood waiting by the kitchen island. She offered a polite smile, handed me the folder of documents, and stepped outside to give me a moment alone. The air still smelled like cedar polish and faint lavender, the scent I'd chosen. But the energy in the space had shifted, as if the walls had learned how to keep secrets. Leo came bounding down the hallway the moment he heard the door. He paused as if to double-check it was really me. Then he ran straight into my arms. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, scooping him up. His paws were a little dusty. His tail thumped against my coat. He nuzzled into the crook of my neck like nothing had ever gone wrong. Like I had never left. Like betrayal couldn't touch him. I held him tighter than I meant to. Then I set him down, gently walked to the counter, and signed my name at the bottom of the final document. Transfer of deed. Full reclamation. No ceremony, no announcement, just ink and initials and the quiet restoration of something that should have never been stolen. I didn't walk through the rest of the house, didn't open drawers, didn't check closets. It wasn't mine anymore, not the way it used to be, but I took back what mattered. I looked at Leo. "Let's go," I said softly. "We've got a new place now," and with that we left. Not to chase the past, but to build something that no one else could take. I didn't want a city. After everything, the noise of closeness, the sidewalks, the small talk, the forced smiles felt too sharp. I wanted distance, air, something that could hold my silence without making it feel like absence. So I bought a cabin. Not a glamorous one, just a sloping roof structure tucked near the edge of Mount Hood, where the fog clings low in the morning and the trees move like they're breathing. The real estate listing had called it remote. I called it perfect. The porch faced east. I'd sit there with my coffee at sunrise, Leo at my feet, and feel nothing dramatic, just steady, like my breath finally had somewhere to land. I didn't go back to active service. I'd earned my retirement and the military honored that. But I didn't vanish either. I started working remotely with a nonprofit that supports military spouses, especially the ones left behind emotionally before they're left legally. I wasn't the only one who'd received adult emails while their name was still stitched onto a uniform. My job was quiet. Case reviews, logistical coordination, pairing abandoned partners with legal aid and mental health support. Most of it happened through calls and screens, but the connection was real. For the first time, I didn't feel like a uniform or a number. I felt useful. Like everything I had endured had shaped me into someone who could hold space for others climbing the same cliff. In the afternoons, I built furniture. I'd taken a woodworking class years ago on a base in Germany. Now I turned that half-forgotten skill into ritual. A table here, a bookshelf there, a set of chairs for a neighbor who'd lost her husband last fall. It became my therapy, measuring, sanding, assembling something solid, something that didn't lie, didn't leave, didn't send emails titled, "Let's be adults about this." I sold a few pieces, not many. I wasn't trying to get rich. The money I did earn after taxes, after materials, I deposited into a scholarship fund for military spouses. Women and men who'd stood in kitchens stared at empty chairs and rebuilt themselves anyway. I named the fund after my grandmother. She had once told me being strong isn't about holding it all in. It's about choosing where to pour it. So that's what I did. I poured my strength into cedar and oak, into Zoom calls at midnight, into small checks that would pay for someone else's nursing license, paralegal certificate, or master's in psychology. I didn't need Kyle's apology. I didn't need Monica's regret. I had peace. And peace, it turned out, looked a lot like a mountain cabin, a dog snoring on a sunlit rug, and a quiet inbox. It arrived without warning. Tucked among a stack of utility bills and nonprofit mailers was a simple cream-colored envelope with my name handwritten in soft cursive. No return address, just a Kentucky postmark dated a week ago. I opened it at the kitchen counter. The paper was thick, heavy almost, the kind they sell in packs for weddings or formal events. Inside was a folded letter written in blue ink with curves and slants that reminded me of someone raised on manners and heartbreak. Dear Elena, I don't know you and you don't know me, but that hasn't stopped you from saving my life. I stopped reading. Not because I was overwhelmed, though maybe I was, but because something in my chest cracked open. Not painfully, just like a window that hadn't been opened in years, finally letting in air. I kept reading. My husband left for training 3 years ago, and then he never really came back, not to me anyway. He was there physically, but gone in every way that mattered. One day he told me I'd thank him eventually for the divorce papers. I never did. I found your story in an article shared in a private forum. They didn't name you, but they told just enough for me to understand you had been through it too. The betrayal, the silence, the way people make you feel like the shame belongs to you, not the liar. But you didn't disappear. You built something. She said she saw my scholarship fund mentioned in a small military spouse newsletter. How she clicked through, followed the breadcrumbs, and realized through quiet details and one specific phrase I had once said in an interview that it had to be me. You said I didn't want revenge. I wanted to reclaim what was mine, my voice, my name, my peace. That line pulled me out of the bath one night when I thought about never getting out again. I sat down. I hadn't realized I was still standing still, holding the letter in trembling fingers. Leo patted over and rested his head on my knee. I ran my hand across his back as I read the final lines. You've never met me, but I promise you, you've saved me. I'm starting over now. I've applied to nursing school. I used part of the fund your organization helped raise. I just wanted you to know betrayal didn't ruin you. It redefined you. And that gave the rest of us permission to live again, too. With love and deep thanks, a stranger who remembers who she is now. I folded the letter with the care of someone holding a piece of their past and a glimpse of their purpose in the same breath. I didn't cry. Instead, I reached for a magnet from my old base in Bahrain and pinned the letter to my fridge, right between a wood-burned quote and a paw-print photo of Leo as a puppy. Every time I reached for oat milk or blueberries, I'd see it. A reminder that I was never just the woman who got the email. I was the woman who responded, understood, and then rewrote the ending. The text came at 3:17 in the morning. My phone buzzed once. Just once. Leo stirred at the foot of the bed but didn't lift his head. The cabin was quiet, wrapped in pine stillness and the hush of early winter. I rolled over, reached for the screen, and saw it. I'm sorry. I didn't realize what I lost. No name, just those words. Simple. Almost cowardly in their vagueness. But I didn't need a name. I knew that voice. I'd once built a life around it. I stared at the message for a while, not because I was tempted to respond, but because I felt nothing. No heat, no ache, no fury. Just air. Like a window had been closed a long time ago, and the wind had finally stopped knocking. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen barefoot, made tea, rooibos, and ginger. I didn't turn on any lights, just moved through the soft dark lit only by the stove's blue flame. Leo followed me as he always did. I sipped slowly. Read the message again, still no emotion. Then I smiled. Not the kind of smile you show someone. The kind you keep to yourself when you know you're free. I opened my phone, held my thumb over the message, tapped delete. Not block, not mute, delete. Because some things don't need answers. Some ghosts don't deserve a place in the room anymore. I slid the phone into the drawer with the unpaid receipt's spare cabin keys and dried lavender from a Sunday market. Closed it gently, quietly. I stood there for a minute. Not to say goodbye. I had already done that in 100 ways before. This was just the punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence. I used to think closure came from conversations, from apologies, from some grand reckoning where the other person finally saw what they had done and begged for forgiveness. But that's not how healing works, at least not for me. Closure, I learned, is quiet. It's a deleted text at 3 a.m., a dog sleeping at your feet, tea made in silence. No need to prove anything anymore. Kyle's words weren't wrong. He had lost something. But what he never realized was, so had I. I lost illusions. I lost naivety. I lost the version of me that would have stayed and begged for love. And in that loss, I gained myself. So I sipped the rest of my tea, looked out at the stars through the frost-framed window, and whispered to no one, "You didn't lose me. I found me." It was a quiet morning, no texts, no emails, no steps echoing down a hallway I didn't recognize. Just the slow rhythm of a cabin, waking up, a pot of water heating the soft padding of Leo's paws, and the pale winter sun nudging its way through the curtains. I got up, wrapped myself in the old wool cardigan I'd found at a thrift shop in town, and made my way to the bathroom. The mirror was fogged from the steam, but I didn't wipe it right away. I stood there for a moment, watching the way the condensation slid down the glass. Soft, inevitable. Then I reached up and cleared a small patch. And I saw her. Me. Not the wife who had packed care packages and memorized deployment schedules. Not the woman who had once signed joint tax returns with someone who would one day forge her signature. Not the soldier in uniform with a brave face and a broken heart. Just me. Hair tied up, skin unfiltered, eyes soft, not guarded, and a smile, a real one. It wasn't wide. It didn't flash like something meant for a camera. It was quiet, almost hesitant, like it had waited years for permission. But it was there, and I recognized it. Not because I'd seen it in photos, but because it felt like home. I leaned in, both hands resting on the counter, and whispered something I hadn't dared to say in a long time. "You made it." I didn't get everything back. Not the house, not the marriage, not the years I spent pretending things were fine. But I got myself back. And that, I realized, was enough. I touched the glass as if to anchor the moment, to make it real. Then I stepped away, let the mirror fog again, because I didn't need to hold on. Not anymore. Outside, the wind moved through the trees in long, steady breaths. Leo barked at something in the distance, probably a squirrel, maybe a deer. Life, I thought, keeps moving, whether you're ready or not. I poured myself some coffee, opened the window, let the cold in. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't brace against it. If you're watching this and something in my story feels familiar, maybe it's the silence after betrayal, the weight of an empty house, or the way people ask, "How are you?" and you just nod. Then I want you to know something: you are not weak for being hurt. You are not foolish for trusting someone. And you are not alone in picking up the pieces. When my world cracked open, I thought the quiet would swallow me, but piece by piece I built something stronger. Not a perfect life, just an honest one. One where I don't flinch at the sound of an email. One where I can look in the mirror and see a woman who did not break. If you're somewhere between the hurt and the healing, I hope you'll give yourself the gift of stillness. Not the kind that comes from giving up, but the kind where you catch your breath and realize it's still yours. I never confronted Kyle. I never needed to. He lost something he'll never get back. And I found something I didn't even know I'd lost myself. If my story moved you, or if you know someone walking a similar road, I invite you to share it. Not for me, but for every woman quietly choosing her own comeback, one steady step at a time. Because revenge doesn't always look like fire and fury. Sometimes it looks like peace. And peace is the loudest thing I've ever known.